At the beginning of the year, I started a project that I've called the Monthly World Cinema Project. As a lover of film, my goal is to watch everything. I feel like I'll only be happy when I've consumed as much about film history as I can. But this feeling can also lead to decision paralysis, being faced with such a large selection of films throughout history that it becomes almost impossible to decide where to start. Do I explore silent films or do I explore films from the French New Wave? It became crippling. So I created the Monthly World Cinema Project to guide my casual film viewing. When I go to watch a movie, I can easily choose based on the country I decide to focus on that month. This way I could also expand my cinematic knowledge, learning about international master filmmakers, while also having the pressure of indecision lifted off my shoulders. In April, I focused my watching towards films from Spain. My experience with Spanish film was limited. I'm a huge Almodovar fan, and his films were really the peak of my Spanish film knowledge, so I was really excited to dive into a whole new film culture that I didn't know much about. I started the month with Volver, a truly sensuous film with a performance by Penelope Cruz that hasn't left my mind. Volver centers around a family of women who deal with the aftermath of their thought-dead mother coming back to life. Almodovar is an expert at dropping you into a beautiful, colorful, and emotional world of his own creation, and I adored every second of it. I admire his ability to take huge themes like family and death and boil it down to simple displays of character and situation, and the added melodrama gives it that Almodovar touch that makes it so special. This is a really interesting film to analyze alongside All About My Mother and Parallel Mothers, two other films starring Penelope Cruz that deal heavily with her as a mother figure. Penelope Cruz masterfully deals with a range of complicated emotions as she juggles raising her daughter with the complications of her own relationship with her mother. The ending ties up the story perfectly, and it has one of the most beautiful ending credit sequences I've ever seen. I would give Volver 4.5 out of 5. Next, I watched Hamon Hamon, a film that I loved. Hamon Hamon centers around a young woman, played again by Penelope Cruz, who becomes pregnant by the son of a powerful underwear manufacturing tycoon, and the disastrous fallout of their relationship. This is just an absolutely entertaining film to watch from beginning to end. The further along the film develops, we question if there are any good characters, and I think director Bigas Lunas' take on humanity is that we are all just animals at the end of the day. The film portrays sexuality and depravity with such a stark reality that somehow manages to be hilarious. This also happens to be Penelope Cruz's film debut, which, wow. She's paired with her future husband Javier Bardem as the sexy bad boy who gets in the way of her relationship, and they are the perfect on-screen pairing. Hamon Hamon is the perfect blend of tragedy and comedy, a hodgepodge of plots and characters that all come together to an explosive ending. There is a fascinating juxtaposition between sex and food throughout the movie. They are oftentimes connected visually and through dialogue, and this is utterly fascinating and something that I had never thought to put together in my brain before. I was also a huge fan of the edit. There were some cuts that literally made me laugh out loud. This was a great movie. I give it a 4.5 out of 5. I unintentionally watched 3 Penelope Cruz films in a row because next up was Alejandro Amenabar's Open Your Eyes, a film about a handsome young man who was thrown into a psychological mystery after a car accident leaves him with a scarred face. I was excited to dive into some Spanish surrealism, and Open Your Eyes did not disappoint. Amenabar creates a hauntingly romantic world with dreamy visuals and haunting imagery. The plot is slowly unveiled, layer by layer becoming more surreal until the nightmare fully reveals itself, making for an extremely compelling viewing experience that pays off. The sci-fi elements are almost second nature to the heartbreaking relationships and stakes. I have to double down on the visuals, which are absolutely stunning. The use of light is inspired, and the prop work with Cesar's mask will stay in my mind for a long time. I couldn't help but be reminded of A Different Man and wonder if the filmmaker had this film as inspiration. It's a movie that feels monumental and influential. Once things go full sci-fi, it feels like the end ties things up a little lazily, and some of the emotional conclusions play second fiddle to the plot. I'd give this movie a 4 out of 5. Next, I watched Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, which follows a recently released psychiatric patient who kidnaps an actress in order to make her fall in love with him. This is another Almodovar and one that has easily moved up in my Almodovar rankings. It's just a brilliant movie, so different from anything I've seen from him, yet completely from his singular mind. Only Almodovar could make a Stockholm Syndrome romantic comedy that feels completely inoffensive and oftentimes genuinely romantic. The whole thing is his commentary on the ridiculousness of monogamy, specifically the farce of marriage, taking the metaphorical tie down and manifesting it into harsh reality. He cleverly plays with the tropes of savagery being tamed by love, which makes for a darkly comic adventure with a perfect ending, especially thanks to Victoria Abril's performance. Antonio Banderas is incredibly compelling as the released psychiatric patient. With pure skill, he makes a truly disturbing character also somehow very sweet, and the fact that he can make the audience question that is a testament to his ability. A great movie. 4.5 out of 5. Early on, I was told I had to watch a film by Carlos Saura, so when I saw Peppermint Frappe on the Criterion Channel, it was an easy next choice. Peppermint Frappe isn't a comfortable movie in the slightest. It follows a man who becomes obsessed with the wife of an old friend. A movie that explores obsession and objectification in such detail should be impossible to make entertaining, but instead Saura chooses to portray these sick and twisted feelings in a stark and simplistic way, making the audience feel almost culpable for witnessing it all. The film is a direct homage to Vertigo, one Hitchcock film that I don't particularly connect with, and I feel like Peppermint Frappe gives Vertigo a run for its money. I think I'm most thankful for this film introducing me to Geraldine Chaplin, the daughter of Charlie Chaplin and a movie star in full force. She plays a double role in Peppermint Frappe, the object of our main character's obsession and the woman who he tries to force into mimicking his obsession. I was fascinated to learn that the film was an expression of repression in Francisco Franco's reign, and that Geraldine Chaplin as the Hitchcock blonde is a representation of a fascination with the foreign West. Overall, a perfectly chilling experience. 5 out of 5. Another Spanish master I knew I had to dive deeper into was Buñuel. The discreet charm of the bourgeoisie is an all-timer, so it was really just the question of what was next, and I totally fumbled the bag. I chose to watch Belle de Jour because it starred one of my favorite French actresses, Catherine Deneuve, and upon watching it quickly realized that it is a French movie in every way besides the fact that it was directed by a Spanish master. So for the purposes of this video, I'll still count it. Belle de Jour follows a young housewife who spends her midweek afternoons as a high-class prostitute while her husband is away at work. I was most impressed by the edit. The way fantasy and memory are cut within the main story is so disarming, like a constant dream or a terrifying nightmare all at the same time. This makes for an experimental but ultimately super impactful exploration of how present desire can be birthed from past experience. I was put in the mind of Baby Girl, which also follows a married woman disengaged from her safe and monogamous sexual life with sadomasochistic fantasies who looks elsewhere for a more dangerous and thrilling experience, and finds one in an exciting but unstable young man. I was really taken by Deneuve's performance. She portrays this mask of a person who every so often gets to show her reality, and both sides of the spectrum are beautifully realized. 4.5 out of 5. Next up was Plácido, a black comedy film directed by Luis Garcia Berlanga, the king of Spanish social satire. Berlanga makes a joke of the false charity of the rich and their relationships with the less fortunate. The situational comedy is expertly set up, the characters and plots are all intertwined, and the interactions are perfectly awkward and real. However, there seems to be a lot of idiosyncrasies specific to Spanish culture that made some of the comedy hard to fully understand. This led to a lot of moments that fell flat for me, or long sections that felt hard to connect with. I feel like these specifics would be much easier to wrap my head around on a second watch, and I think I could then fully appreciate the excellence of Berlanga. But for a first watch, it paled in comparison to the other great films I watched this month. 3 out of 5. For my last film in April, I circled back around to Carlos Saura because I was so impressed with Peppermint Frappe. Stress is 3, or Stress es Tres Tres, which is a brilliant title, follows 3 people, a married couple and their friend, on a road trip from Madrid to Algeria. Saura is on record saying that he felt constrained by the story of Peppermint Frappe and wanted to make something more experimental to unbind himself. Thus, Stress is 3 was created. What he said was a kind of liberation. It is certainly more experimental but equally as watchable as his previous film. But instead of being so closely tied to plot, everything is centered around the relationship between these three individuals, the jealousy stemming from Antonio, and how it eats him from the inside out, causing self-sabotage and violent thoughts. Sada explains that the film is really about a developing Spain, and Antonio is a symbol of a man bound by old taboos and moral repression. Then, Geraldine Chaplin as Teresa is the symbol of freedom, a free bird that Antonio constantly tries to cage. She is mesmerizing as Teresa and also wearing the same wig she wore in Peppermint Frappe, with a reveal that made me laugh out loud. These messy character dynamics and experimental story elements make this such an easy watch, and I'll absolutely revisit it in the future. 4.5 out of 5. I was really impressed by the Spanish films I watched this month. The films I viewed all have a distinct perspective on historical, cultural, and political issues, and there is a sensuality that tracks through all of them. The freeness and appreciation of sexuality is so different than American film, and something that I appreciate being at the forefront. These films are all so different, and here are some takeaways. Almodovar has always been an impactful filmmaker for me, but diving deeper into his work has solidified him as a personal all-timer. As a completionist, I look forward to finishing out his filmography. Penelope Cruz rightfully holds the title of one of the best actresses to come out of Spain, and one of the best to ever do it, period. Watching her early films, along with the early films of Javier Bardem and Antonio Banderas, it is so fascinating to watch the journey of a star to an international platform. The first-time director that made the strongest impact on me is Carlos Saura. His films are extremely compelling, and I want to rewatch the two I watched this month already. His visuals are simple but haunting. They pry their way into your mind and refuse to leave. I can't wait to watch more of his work. In total, I watched 8 Spanish films in April with an average score of 4.3. In May, I'll be focusing my film viewing towards films from Iran. If you have any suggestions for films or filmmakers to prioritize, please comment below and join me in my watching. And let me know your favorite Spanish films. Until next time.